Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Dali and today I'll be talking all about my birth story with baby number one. If you have seen any of my videos, you know that I'm a mom of 3 boys and a stepmom to 1 girl, ages 10, 5, 4, and 2.5 months for this one over here. So today I figured while this cutie is breastfeeding, I will go ahead and tell you all about my first birth. I think it's important to tell those stories in order, so I am going to start with my oldest, and it would be a 3-part series, so I'll make 3 videos, 1 for each birth. With my first, I went into labor at 39 weeks and 1 day. For me, it was very much like the movies. My water broke at around 9 p.m. while we were going to bed. As soon as I laid down, about 2-3 minutes later, I heard a pop. It actually sounded like a water balloon popping. I wasn't sure at first if it was my water that broke, and then I stood up and it just gushed down my legs. I hopped in the shower really fast. I rinsed off, I got dressed, and we went to the hospital. Now, at the time, I was living on the island of Montreal. We did not have a car. I decided, well, why don't we just take the bus and the train to the hospital. It was not a far ride. We actually didn't end up taking the bus. We walked about 10 minutes to the subway station, and we took the 2-stop ride to the hospital. So all in all, it was about, I would say, maybe a 20-minute commute. And my contractions just started, so it really more felt like somewhat painful period cramps. It really wasn't anything serious at first, hence why I felt okay taking the train to the hospital. Now, once I got to the hospital, we went in, we checked in, and they told me, well, your water definitely broke. They took a little sample of the amniotic fluid to make sure that there was my water, because sometimes it happens that people think their water breaks, but it's not their water. Most of the time it's pee. In any case, for me it was actually my water breaking, and they admitted me. They gave me a room and they asked me, well, what is your birth plan? So I explained to them that I wanted to go without any pain medication as much as possible. So I wanted to try and labor without epidural, without any pain medication as much as I can. And then if it became too much, I wanted to get an epidural. At that time, I still was thinking that maybe I can do the whole thing without an epidural. At the hospital, they were really nice. They had a bathtub, they had the bouncy balls, but in the beginning when we just got there, my pain really wasn't very bad. It was, I would say, maybe a 4 out of 10. So they told me, okay, well, to speed things up, go ahead and walk around the hospital. So the more you walk, it will make labor come on a little bit faster. We went on, my brother came by to the hospital, and we went and walked all around the hospital for maybe 40 minutes to an hour. And at that point, my contraction actually started feeling like contraction. I would say the pain went to like a 6, and they were starting to come a little bit sooner apart, but it was still maybe 20 minutes in between contractions. However, we went back up. They checked me and I was only about 4 centimeters dilated, and at this point I wasn't really down for walking anymore. So we stayed in the room and I bounced on the bouncy ball. My husband did the whole back massaging, which is really helpful. So I bounced on the big bouncy ball. That was really helpful. And as the contractions started coming on a little bit, as the contractions started coming on a little bit closer together, so I would say every like 5 to 7 minutes, I wanted to do the bath. So they filled up the bathtub for me. I got into the bathtub, and at first it was amazing. It really, really took the pain off. But after about 10-15 minutes, it just felt too hot and too uncomfortable, and my contractions were getting a lot stronger. The pain was at this point at like a 7-8, and they were coming in a little bit closer together. So they were coming in at around 4 minutes apart. I went back into the room, and a doctor comes in, and she introduces herself. She was a student there, and she says, okay, well, we're going to induce you now. At this point, I was really shocked by this, as I didn't really understand why they had to induce me. So I argued. And honestly, I think that's something that I really, really recommend for, is advocating for yourself or advocating for your loved one. If you don't understand why a certain procedure needs to be done, ask questions, have them tell you all the information. Because in my case, an induction was not at all necessary yet. When your water breaks, you have about 24 hours to try and labor naturally until it's considered dangerous for the baby, and then you should be induced to try and get the baby out, because if there's not enough liquid, your baby may go into distress. Now, that's what I've learned, and that's what I kind of knew going into this, because I did do a lot of research before my birth about what can happen, what can go wrong, and so on. So I asked the doctor, well, why do you need to induce me? And she says, well, it's very dangerous for your baby, and you need to go into labor now. And I said to her, well, it's only been about 7 hours since my water broke. Why is it so urgent? And she says, well, you're endangering your baby. There are risks for complications. So I told her, okay, what is that percentage of risk? What are exactly the risks? And now, what is the percentage of risk that could happen from you inducing me? What medications are you going to use? Because inducing somebody also comes with its own set of risks. So I wanted to see where we were standing on that. And at this point, I still wasn't understanding why she needed to induce me 7 hours in after my water broke, when everything I read had a 24-hour period. I was a little bit confused. So she says, okay, I'm gonna go check it out. She leaves the room, and I have never seen this doctor again. I don't know if it was just happened so to be this change of shifts or what, but that doctor has never ever returned to my room. A completely different doctor came in 20-30 minutes later, and she said, I understand that you don't want to be inducted. I said, well, it's not that I don't want to be inducted. If it's what's best for me and my baby, of course, I'll have an induction. However, I understand that I still have 24 hours to labor naturally, and then if the labor doesn't progress, I will need to be induced for everyone's safety. And she says, well, yes, that's exactly what it is. So why are we having this conversation right now, 7 hours into my labor? So we agreed that if after 24 hours nothing was happening, we'll go ahead and induce me. At this point, you need to understand this whole conversation is happening while my contractions are about 4 minutes, 3-4 minutes apart. Extremely painful. So it was not a very pleasant conversation for me. It was really, really hard to focus on what I had to say, to focus on what it is I really want them to explain to me. And the fact that I've researched so much before really, really helped me. Knowledge is power. I recommend to anybody who's going in for any procedure really at a hospital, but anyone who's pregnant and is going to deliver at a hospital, to really look into everything that could happen and look into everything that could go wrong. Honestly, nobody wants anything to go wrong, but if you have that knowledge, if you have that information in the back of your mind, at least you're prepared and you're not caught unaware if something happens. Anyways, back to our story. At this point, my contractions were really, getting really close together at about 2 to 3 minutes apart, but I was only about 6 centimeters dilated. So they came in and they checked me. At this point, I couldn't do it. The contractions were really, really painful, and to me it felt like there were like one contraction would end and another would start, even though the monitor told me that it was about 3 minutes apart. It felt like there was no stop, there was no rest in between the contractions. So I asked for the epidural. It took them some time. It took them about 15 to, oh, so it took them about 15, let's try again. It took them about 15-20 minutes for the anesthesiologist to come in. The anesthesiologist came in and explained to me everything, all the risks, everything associated with it, and he told me you have to stay really, really still while I put the needle in your back. We tried to time it so that it was between contractions. It didn't happen. He was putting the needle in and I was having a contraction. I was holding on to my husband for dear life, trying not to move. Very, very painful. Not the procedure, the contraction, trying not to move part. And then they did the epidural. They explained to me how it works. They gave me a little button thingy with it. About 15 minutes later, it kicked in and it was bliss. Honestly, I was so happy that I got the epidural. I was so tired at this point. It's somewhere around 3:34 in the morning, and I was just so exhausted. I was so tired, and the moment they gave me the epidural, the moment it started working, I fell asleep. So I took a long nap. I fell asleep. And the next thing I knew, it was around 11 o'clock in the morning. Nurse woke me up and said, okay, we're gonna check you now. They looked and she's like, well, you're 10 centimeters dilated, get ready to push. So basically I went from having contractions, extremely painful contractions, to taking a beautiful nap, like recovering, and then being woken up by the nurse, and the nurse saying, all right, you are ready to go. Basically, my body did all the work while I was napping with the epidural, and I got ready to push. I started pushing. The nurse told me to go ahead and push, and she explained to me how to push. She's like, pretend like you're going to the bathroom. So I'm on my back, my husband is at my shoulder, and I pushed for about 35 minutes, and my son was born. So my son was born at 11:40 in the morning. I delivered my placenta about 2-3 minutes later, and they had to do some stitches. The whole time I did not feel any pain. I felt my son passing, like I felt the pressure as he was coming out. I felt the pressure when his head came out, and then kind of the whole body went in really quickly after, but I did not feel any pain whatsoever. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I was actually like laughing and talking to the nurses throughout the whole experience. So it was a really, really calm atmosphere in the room while he was being born. It was a really amazing experience, honestly. So as soon as my son was born, they put him on my chest, which is amazing. Skin to skin is so important in the first months of life for the baby, but really in the very beginning, as soon as they're born, for their temperature regulation and in general to promote breastfeeding, if that's what you choose to do. For me, it was very important. So they had him on my chest. They delivered my placenta, they did the stitching. I did not feel a thing, which was amazing. Then they had my husband cut the umbilical cord. Once all of that was done, I would say about 40 minutes later, they came in and they moved us. So they moved me with the whole bed into my actual room where I'd be staying, because you deliver in the delivery room and then they move you to your actual room. What's wrong? So they moved me to the room, they weighed the baby. Actually, before they moved us, they weighed the baby, and they gave him back to me. My son has never left my side. Any procedures they had to do, everything they had to do was done right there next to us, which was amazing. The nurses at the hospital were so helpful. They showed us how to swaddle. They showed us how to bathe the baby. They talked to us about all the things they have to talk about, like sudden infant death, how your baby has to sleep on his back. They helped us with breastfeeding, and I'll talk about breastfeeding, I think, in a whole separate video dedicated to breastfeeding. For the birth, I think that's about it. We stayed at the hospital for 2.5 days. So we came in at 9:30 p.m. on a Wednesday. I delivered him on a Thursday at 11:40, and on Saturday morning we were out. We were one of the first people out on a Saturday morning, so I think around like 8 a.m. we were out of the hospital and we brought our baby boy home. So this was my story. This was my first birth story, and I will make a video for my second and third births, which were a lot faster, so there will probably be much shorter videos. There will be a lot less to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, if you enjoy this, please consider subscribing, liking the video, and as always, leave me comments. As I'm a new YouTuber, I would really appreciate some input on what it is you would like to watch, and I could make those videos happen. All right, thank you so much. Bye. See you next time.